Hey everybody, it's TVO out for a Bigfoot stride on the Appalachian Trail. And if you don't know what that means, I'll make a video to show you what I'm doing, because I'm injured and I can't run. So I've created this really funky way to move my body that allows me to stay fit and engaged without making my injury worse, which is something in the bottom of my foot. I get the MRI results on Tuesday and Monday, and we'll see what it is and what I might be able to do to work with it. Anyway, I'm really enjoying myself today. I went 4 miles up the mountain and was moving, really cruising. In fact, I think I broke some course records and set some PRs on Strava, like all the people that have done this trail and the segments that are tracked. I think I knocked some of it out of the park, and I wasn't even really running. I'm doing this long, low, what I call Bigfoot stride. It looks like the videos of the Bigfoot that was filmed in the 70s with its arms swinging in this long stride. That's kind of what I do. Anyway, it was a rough morning. I have a lot of rough mornings. One of the things that made this morning rough is that yesterday I was out on the Elliptigo, which is a really cool, I wouldn't call it a bike, but it's an elliptical machine on wheels with cranks, so you can move around. And my buddy Dave Dunham was kind enough to let me use it while I'm injured. So I was doing that, and I was about to finish up and cranking down a hill at probably 25 miles an hour. And I could see this hornet coming right towards my eye, and it all happened so fast. And not only did the hornet hit me at 25 miles an hour, probably plus 10 or 15, but after it hit me, it stung me. So it was whack, sting. And it got me right there, like a quarter inch below my eyeball, and you can probably see the result. It was a lot worse when I woke up this morning. But as I've been moving on this run, it's draining a little bit, so I can actually see. When I woke up, I could barely open my eye. Anyway, the reason I'm making this video is just to, number one, keep you engaged in what I'm up to, because I haven't put a lot of videos out there as to what I'm doing in my process, because I kind of lost my voice. And I don't mean that in the literal sense of not being able to make a sound, but I haven't known how to communicate what I'm thinking and where I'm going. And the reason for that is that as my knowledge base continues to expand, as I think more and more deeply about that which I'm learning and about the world and society and the current political climate, and just seeing how in 2017 our technologies have evolved to the point of just really crazy possibility in a good and a bad way, and yet human individual minds or societal collective minds have not evolved at all. We're still Stone Age in our thinking, and yet we have weapons of mass destruction and weapons of mass distraction, otherwise known as the media or Facebook, where you've got all these attention merchants studying at Stanford's Persuasion Lab, studying the science or new science of captology, which is essentially how to hijack your eyeballs, how to hijack your brain, and how to make technology addictive. There is an actual program at Stanford where people study how to manipulate you using computer technology. And that's frightening. And you should be scared of this. And you should understand how it works. So, not only do I have a brain that is very sensitive and tends towards depression, but the more I learn, the more I see a world that I can't impact in the way that I thought that I once could. I thought it was really simple. You learn the facts, you learn about a particular thing, and then you give people the facts. You just share the facts. And that once people know the facts, they'll change. But the more that I learn, the more that I'm coming to understand that fact is relative, not necessarily in an objective sense, but in a subjective sense. That we each have frames of reference that we see the world through, and those frames have a different set of facts. And that doesn't mean that those facts are actual, objective, empirical facts, but they're facts of this particular frame. They help keep this frame together. And all human beings see the world through frames. There's no way around it. It's the way our brains are physically set up. It is their natural inclination. And most people have frames that are not challenged. They live inside of belief systems that are not open to new input, not open to data, not open to experimentation, or open to questioning. And once you start to understand this, you see that the facts, whether or not they're objectively accurate, or at least accurate at this present time based on our technology and our understanding, so scientists often use the terms, it seems as if, rather than, this is the truth. Well, right now, it seems as if. That's how science generally frames a fact. And they're pretty good. They're pretty close. Maybe something will change, but it's rare that something changes dramatically. We just get more and more precise in mathematics and physics and chemistry, and it's rare that things are overturned. Anyway, so I've been going through kind of an existential crisis, and my sensitive brain is looking around and seeing angry people, seeing violent people, seeing people just stuck inside of these belief systems that are so unhelpful to themselves and to their neighbors and to other people, and that are leading us over the edge of a cliff. And I've started to feel powerless because the facts don't make an impact. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I realized that I can be doing my best to try to put stuff out there, but the result may be minimal. My views keep going down, 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 as my understanding keeps going up, 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 up. I'm getting a greater and greater understanding of the mechanics of being human, and I'm not going to tell you I know everything, not even close. Nobody knows everything, but I know a hell of a lot more than I did last year, and a hell of a lot more than I did 2 years ago, and oh my God, the stuff that I knew 5 years ago? Not even close. And when I look back on the beginnings of Running Raw and the certainty with which I spoke, it's like, wow, dude, you were so naive then. And I'll look back on this moment right now, next year or 10 years from now, and I'll say, oh my God, dude, you were so naive then. That's always the case if you're open to new possibility, if you're open to expansion. But things were so much simpler in 2006. When I came out and started talking about things, there was one solution. There was one problem and one solution. And it was all about diet. That's the problem. Everything can be boiled down to a dietary issue. And everything can be solved with a dietary solution. And I see so much of that still being spouted out. And that's where I started. So I can't really judge people that are in that place in their life where they think that a particular diet is going to solve everything and that every problem is related to poor diet choices. Some things are definitely related to poor diet choices, and some things can definitely be made better by a change in one's diet, but I do not believe that diet is the answer. Diet is one piece in a very complex puzzle. And what's much more important is why we eat the way we eat. Not what we eat, but why we eat it. And what frame we see those foods inside of, and what frame we see ourselves inside of. What categories we create. And then how we interact with the world based on those categories. So I've learned enough now to understand that I can't just say this is the answer, go do it, because I don't have the answer, and I know that the vast majority of people don't see what I'm saying as factual or as scientifically rigorous. They can immediately reject it without any investigation of the conversation. They'll have an opinion that says, well, I don't think that's true. But what is that opinion based on? How much of this have you explored? How many hundreds of hours of research have you put into this particular conversation to come to that opinion? Or do you just have a gut instinct that says, I don't think that's true? This is what you're up against. All human brains are built to think that they're the smartest brain in the universe, essentially. And even people that don't think they're that smart still have this focus of, I guess you call it a self-fulfilling bias, where I believe that I'm right about a lot of things, even if it's just about me. And maybe the thing that I know with absolute certainty is that I'm a worthless human being, and you can't tell me anything to the contrary. So even if I put you in a superior position, I put your understanding of me in an inferior position, because you can't see how bad I am. You can't see how pathetic or worthless I am. Don't try to tell me otherwise. You're wrong. So even people that believe that they're less than still believe that they're superior in their understanding of that comparison. So it's a funny dynamic in the brain. Anyway, so there you go. I'm in this place of existential muteness. How do I talk? From this point forward, who am I? What is my message? Who am I talking to? Why am I talking? And I'm wrangling with this on a daily basis and continuing my research and understanding and trying to bring all of it into a greater perspective, trying to figure out what is signal and what is noise, and why I've chosen something to be signal over something else, because everything is signal from some perspective. Everything, all noise is a signal, depending on the frame that you're viewing it from. But we can't view everything as signal. We can't be totally open to the moment, as some people with a misunderstanding of certain spiritual belief systems think that, well, you just have to be totally open to the moment. That's not possible, because if everything has equal value, you can't do work. You can't do anything with it. You're completely inept. You have to make choices. You have to say, this is what I want to extract from this moment. I'm going to create inequality temporarily so that I can do work, so that I can have an experience in this moment. But without that choice of choosing one over another, of choosing one signal, or choosing to make a particular aspect of noise into a signal, you can't do anything. Work is not possible without inequality. Work is not possible without a gradient. That's what gravity does. It creates gradients. Gravity is about accumulation of something to a greater degree in one area than another, and that greater accumulation in one area creates a gradient. You now have this system of inequality, and because of that inequality, a flow can happen, and that flow allows for work. This is what a windmill is all about. This is what any type of energy is about. This is thermodynamics. You need inequality to do work, because absolute equality, or what scientists refer to as equilibrium, is known as maximum entropy. And if you don't know what entropy is, it's basically, it's not disorganization, as most people think. It's absolute organization, where everything is equally distributed, where there is no more gradients. So in the universe, at one point, scientists believe that things will get so spread out that there won't be any more gradients and no work will be possible, and it'll come to what they call the heat death of the universe. Because heat requires gradients, heat requires inequality, heat requires consumption, one thing consuming another. And if there is a consumer and that which is consumed, there's an unequal relationship. One thing is dominant over the other. I'm consuming you, therefore I am superior, at least in that context of metabolism or heat. Not actually superior. I don't believe in actual superiority, but just from that particular equation. The thing that's higher than the other, the thing that moves downhill. But eventually everything moves downhill, and energy is lost or dissipated as heat, and things eventually die. Maximum entropy is achieved, no more work can be done, everything is equal, and therefore there's no way to differentiate, and without differentiation, you can't do anything. And I know that's probably way too abstract for many of you, but that's what my brain is doing these days. The more I learn, the more I integrate these concepts into just an experience of life. And that experience for me in life now is realizing that being present is not about being open to everything. It's about being open within constraints. I get to choose the constraints though, and that's the freedom here. Those constraints are not chosen for me. They are not put upon me. My free will is choosing which constraints I will direct my automatic hardware towards, because my automatic hardware are going to do what they're going to do. But I have a little bit of ability to put them inside of a constraint, just like water flowing over a flat plane. Can't really do work because it's dispersed. But if you dig a channel and you make one end of the channel lower than the other end, well then the water can do work because you've concentrated it and you've made a downhill gradient. You've made the start and finish unequal, and now work is possible. So that is a constraint. That channel is constraining the water. So when I come out here, I'm open to that which is inside of my chosen constraint, and only that. And then I get to fully develop that data inside the constraint. Water crossing, there's water flowing in valley. It's constrained by the sides of the valley there. And it does work. It's producing energy, or releasing energy as it flows. So I'm learning this about science too. That scientists, really good scientists now in 2017, are incredibly constrained in their focus. They have to be. You can't be a general scientist now and actually do research. You can have an understanding of the data that's coming out, but that doesn't make you a scientist. That makes you somebody who reads science. But in order to do research, you can't work in generalities. You have to work in ridiculously precise, specific domains, or subdomains, or subdomains. And you have to be incredibly narrow-minded. You have to put on blinders and constrain yourself to studying something in what most would call a very reductionist way. And reductionism gets a really bad rap these days by a holistic community or a holistic belief system, because many scientists don't see the bigger picture. And I agree with that. But we don't look to individual scientists. It's a mistake to look at two individual scientists to give us the answers. What we look to instead is science. This larger thing, this nebulous thing called science. It's like a city. New York City has been New York City since, I don't know, the 1600s. Might have changed names, but it's, people know what it is. It's the knowledge of this place, regardless of what the name might have changed from New Amsterdam to New York when it went from the Dutch to the British. It's still the same place. But the people living there in the 1600s are not the people living there now. In fact, every day people die and are born. Every day people move out and move in. Buildings are constantly being torn down and new ones being built, which is a problem I always had with New York. It's always under construction. You never get to enjoy it in a finished sense, and that always bothered me. Like, it's always under construction. Now I realize the value of that. It's like science. That the people keep changing, the buildings keep changing, so we can't point to one person and say, that's New York City. We can't point to one building and say, that's New York City. Because the people change, the buildings change. The government changes, but New York remains. Science remains, regardless of what an individual scientist does, regardless of the impact of the contribution of that scientist. Darwin is probably one of the most influential scientists of the last 500 years. His work just really revolutionized things, and people are still arguing about it, not because it's wrong on a large scale, but because they're trying to work out the specifics more precisely. And they argue over what those specifics are, but still they're moving inside of a more and more precise domain. So even both sides of the argument are more accurate than Darwin himself, because they're looking deeper. They're going down rabbit holes. So we don't look even to Darwin. We look to the study of evolution. We look to the study of genetics and molecular biology, or genetic imprinting, which is a new science that's emerging, which takes a look at epigenetic factors and how the same gene can be different if it comes from a father or if it comes from a mother. It's the exact same gene, but it's got an imprint on it that makes it behave very differently, depending on which of your parents you got it from. So we're learning so much more about this, and that's science. That's not a scientist. So it's a flow. It's a never-ending conversation, just like New York City is a never-ending conversation of people and buildings and vehicles and governments. But it's still New York. There's still this abstract larger container that'll always be New York. Even if sea level rises and nobody lives there anymore, it'll still be New York, regardless of how it changes. We'll just talk about it in a different way. The same with science. And I forgot why I brought that up, but this expansion, this narrow-mindedness, that was it. That I realized that as I've continued to expand, the more powerless I feel, because the more I move towards entropy, the more I move towards inequality of thought and equality of perspective, and I can't do work there. And that's what I mean by I've lost my voice. I don't know how to do work with my voice anymore. And the reason this video exists today is that I've come to the realization that when it comes to voices, as well as anything else in the universe, the laws of thermodynamics apply. And I need to put constraints on my voice. I need to put constraints on my search. I need to put constraints on my intention so that I can do work with it. And I have to let a lot of things remain noise, even though I see value in them, even though I see signal in them. And I was like, oh, that's so good. Yes. Oh, man, I've got to incorporate that. But then the conversation becomes too big, too general, too vague, and it can't do work anymore. People don't know how to relate to it. And maybe you could say the same thing about the conversation I'm having with you right now. And this is what I'm working on. How to constrain my conversations. How to say, yes, that noise over there is signal, and it's a really powerful signal. But I have to make a choice. My choice is to speak here, speak to this. Just like a scientist studying a particular ant species and their particular behavior in a particular region. And that doesn't mean that they think other animals are insignificant. And this is what I mean about scientists being very narrow-minded. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that they have to choose their field of study very, very specifically. And when I say field, maybe that's an inaccurate descriptor. They have to choose their focus of study. This particular ant and this particular behavior of this ant in this particular location, or maybe even the ovaries of this particular ant in this particular location. That's it. That's narrow-minded. That's not a bad thing. That leads to a greater understanding in science, because science takes all of this data together and you can see the bigger picture. You can focus a lens on science itself and come away with understandings that would not be possible without that narrow-minded work. So I see great value in it, but it's a problem when you look toward that scientist and say, well, that dude is smart, or that woman is smart in this particular area, so therefore they must be smart everywhere. Everything they say must be worth its weight in gold. That's called the halo effect, where if someone is really good in one domain, even if that domain is athletics, or they're a good actor, we will project onto them this halo that completely circles them, and therefore anywhere they look, anything they talk about must be of value because of the status they've achieved in this other area. And this is dangerous, because there are people that have no business talking with certainty about particular fields And yet they do it all the time, and people take everything they say as the word of God. I see this with Elon Musk, or Peter Thiel, or Neil deGrasse Tyson, or Richard Dawkins. All very smart people, all really important in the domain that they're working in, but they don't know everything. And they probably don't know that they don't know everything. Because if they did, they wouldn't speak with such certainty, and they wouldn't entertain the questions that they do in interviews when people ask them, well, what do you think about this particular area? The response, I don't want to use the word should, but a more accurate response than giving an answer would be, I really don't know. That's not my topic of expertise. You may want to reference this book or these authors, or ask this person that question. I can give you my opinion, but it's not really worth much. You'd probably want to talk to these people over here, but I almost never hear that. I almost always hear them giving their opinion, but that's all it is. It's an opinion. And it's not the opinion of someone who has done the narrow-minded work in that area. And therefore it has little value. So I don't want to be one of those people. I'm a polymath in that I study all kinds of things and I integrate them together in my own actions, behaviors, belief systems, and frames of viewing the world. But now I'm trying to find the constraints that I'm most effective inside of and where I can really expand. Constraints are only a limitation of focus. They're not a limitation of expression. Because the more you focus on a particular domain, on a particular set of noise to turn into signal, the greater your expression becomes, because you see nuances. You see things that you otherwise wouldn't see if you gave it a cursory look. And that's why I'm not a fan of experts in one domain speaking as experts in other domains that they're not, I don't even want to use the term well-versed, but they're not expert in, because they don't see the subtleties, they don't see the nuances. They have a cursory understanding. They have a superficial understanding of it. And they should defer. And I used to be a guy, and maybe I still am, I probably am, that speak on all matter of topics as an expert because I read the words of experts, but that doesn't make me an expert. And that doesn't give me a deep understanding. It gives me a pretty shallow understanding of their conclusions. And conclusions are the results. And a huge part of my channel and my videos is about not focusing on the results, but focusing on the journey. And when I look at the conclusion of somebody that spent 30 years studying something, and I think I understand it, I think I can talk about it expertly because I can parrot the conclusion of the expert, I don't know the journey at all. You could tell me how to be a master piano player. That doesn't mean I can play piano, nor does that mean I understand what it means to be a master piano player and play like that. But someone could describe it to me, say in a book like The Talent Code by Dan Coyle, or Peak by Anders Ericsson. And I think I know, because I heard that description and now I just relate it back to you, but I have no experience with that. I have no embodied neuronal networks that are linked deeply with 10,000 or more hours of experience with that, of trial and error. And trial and error are essentially the same thing. It's failing and failing. They're not opposites of each other. I think a lot of people think that they are when they say it. Lots of failing. And that failing leads you to insight. And that's necessary. That is the foundation. Failure is the foundation of insight. Otherwise, you simply have an understanding. An understanding doesn't have that foundation of failure. So I think it has a lot less value. And this is why I think it's really important to constrain oneself and one's conversation so that one can really experience failure. And maybe that's it for me, is I've failed putting the facts out there, facts, shallow understanding, in gaining a larger audience and really impacting people in a powerful way. Some people get it, and I'm so grateful that some people do, but it's a tiny, tiny subset, and that doesn't make it of no value. It's just my goal was a wider group. But maybe that's an inappropriate goal for the type of message I'm delivering. So, constraining my message, constraining myself. And the grand conclusion of this grand narrative is that that constraint looks like movement. It's my concept of a mind in motion, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm moving through a very uncertain environment, and you can't see what I'm cruising over, so I'll show you. I'm cruising through this the whole time. This is Vermont, highly glaciated area. It's covered in rocks and roots. This is the Appalachian Trail, and it's just a never-ending series of rocks, roots, and mud. So here we go. It's a combination of rocks, roots, and mud. So my body is making constant decisions about where to put itself, and every one is a novel decision. And I'm interacting with a book prior to making this called Life or edited by John Brockman, where he takes together many of the interviews from edge.org, biologists, microbiologists, etc., E.O. Wilson, Richard Dawkins, Ernst Mayr, and edits them into a book, an audiobook. So I'm listening to, our current understanding of biology and molecular biology, and how there's a lot of different opinions about it, and how complex and nuanced it is. Not easy to grasp and understand. But that doesn't mean that we don't understand anything. Just because people disagree on things doesn't make it invalid. They're simply disagreeing on very, very fine details. They're not disagreeing on the larger general foundations. So, back to constraints. A mind in motion. I'm out here moving, challenging my body, challenging my mind, challenging my cardiovascular system. And my mind, my brain is connected. It's connected to the decisions I'm making, which rock to touch. It's connected to my cardiovascular system. It's connected to my level of alertness, my awareness of the environment, animal sounds, etc., hikers that I keep passing, and my awareness of social environment. Should I continue making the video as I come up on a hiker? Do I want them to hear what I'm saying, or is it disrespectful to be doing this in the midst of their hike on the Appalachian Trail? So I put the camera down and I stop talking. So I'm aware of all these different things in the midst of challenge and discomfort, especially coming up the mountain, going down the mountain now. But when I was coming up, I'm listening intensely, moving intensely, making movement decisions intensely, and my mind becomes, my brain, my body integrate and become something extraordinary for me. And that's available to everyone. It's not that I'm better than anyone else, it's that I'm better than me when I'm not moving. I'm better than me when I'm not doing this. So that is my constraint. This is my new focus. And you could call this running raw, running in a vulnerable, open state through uncertainty, through knowledge that challenges me, causes me to become uncertain, causes me to embrace the unknown or to embrace the idea that I don't know. That is running raw, but that title, unfortunately, is so deeply associated with raw food and running fast that whenever I talk about anything that's not food related or running specific related, people tune out. So I've got to give it a new name, and I think it might be a mind in motion. And that will be my constraint from this point forward. That will be my investigation, because it is an area that I have been intently focused on in a way that I have not seen anyone else focus on. It doesn't mean people aren't doing this, I'm just not aware of it. So this is my domain of expertise. This is what I know best. And a big part of that is turning a state where I wake up in the morning and I'm sleeping a little better than I used to, but still not perfectly. So I wake up tired. I woke up with an eye that, it's opening up a lot now, but I woke up with an eye that I could barely see through. Woke up not feeling great. Woke up depressed. Woke up injured. And yet, boom, I know how to turn that around and transform my experience into one of, oh my God, the world is incredible. Rather than, there's no possibility. I don't want to get out of bed. What am I going to do? Who am I? I'm not a runner. I can't run. I can't race. Who am I? I do this and I find out who I am. And I find out what matters. And what I'm realizing is this is not something I do to accomplish other things. This is something I do so that I can experience who I become in the midst of this. This is how I run into myself, even when I'm not running, doing my Bigfoot walk. So, there you go. That's what's to come. I hope some of you will tune in. Gonna try to make these videos shorter, put them on a new channel. But that is what's important to me, and that is the signal that I'm going to be focused on as I move forward. And that is where I want to focus narrow-mindedly for the foreseeable future, until there's another transformation in me and some other set of noise becomes or appears to be a more powerful signal. Okay, it's a long one, but there you go. I love you guys. See ya.